Hi guys, so Sky Song chapter 20, we're back to Flint. Now today, the tripod is precariously balanced. We're in a different room, things may go terribly wrong. We shall see. Flint fell to his knees, pounding his knuckles against the ice, and beside him, Pebble raked his claws over the surface again and again, but the ice didn't shift. It remained locked over Blue like a depthless seal, and all around her the thunder ghosts twirled. They were dancing now, their voice delighted cackles, as Blue's eyes clouded with terror. "No!" gasped Flint. "Not this! Not this!" He threw back his head as a wail full of love and loss and anger rose in his throat, but in the nick of time, Eska clapped her hand over his mouth and looked in his eyes. "Don't cry out," whispered Eska. "Don't let the thunder ghosts take you too. Think, Flint, what do you have in your rucksack that can help Blue?" Hardly hearing, Flint laid his palms over to the ice, over his sister's hammering fists. He'd put Blue in danger because he had wanted to prove to his brother that he could set things right and find their ma. The shame and longing beat inside him and tears streamed down his cheeks. "I can't lose her too. I can't." Balapan landed by his side and began pecking at Flint's rucksack, desperately trying to wrench it open. You won't lose her because you're a thinker," Eska urged. "A problem solver. Now, think your way out of this." Flint shook his head. "Most of my inventions don't really work. Tompkins right. He's always been right. I can't control magic. I can't even keep my little sister safe. I'm useless." Eska thrust the rucksack into Flint's lap. "Tompkin doesn't know what you're capable of. He can't see how the camouflage cape helped us escape from Winterfire." Blue slammed her fists against the ice and the thunder ghosts let out a rumbling laugh. "Help your sister," Eska murmured. "I know you can." And so, with shaking hands, Flint tipped the objects from his rucksack. The camouflage cape spilled over his lap, but he brushed it aside. His anything knife clattered. We're about to lose the tripod. 2 seconds. His anything knife clattered against the ice, but he ignored that too. And it was only when he held up a small glass bottle filled with golden liquid that he stopped searching. "Maybe this," he whispered. "Bottled sunlight mixed with fiery glow. It's hotter than fire if mixed right." Still trembling, he poured it over the ice above Blue. At first, the pool of golden liquid simply lay on the ice, and Flint's tears rolled faster than the invention began to bubble and hiss, and a second later it burned through the ice to reveal a thrash of limbs below. "Blue!" Flint gasped. There was a clamour of thunder and more scrabbling limbs. Then Flint and Eska hauled Blue out of the lake, and the black ice folded over the hole, sealing the thunder ghosts back where they belonged. Flint held Blue close. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I'll never, ever let you leave Deep Roots again." Blue clung to her brother's waist, gasping the air back in. I love Flint. I love you more than I love you more. I stay you." Flint squeezed her tight, right close to his heart. Then after a while he wiped the tears from his face and looked up at Eska. "Sorry," he whispered. "I didn't expect all that to come out." He blushed and looked away. "Tompkins says crying is a sign of weakness." Eska raised an eyebrow. "Tompkin also says you're not an inventor. And look at what you just did then. You rescued your sister from thunder ghosts, despite how terrified you were." She paused. "So really, tears are just a warm-up for courage." Flint looked down, trying to ignore the thunder ghosts moaning beneath the ice. "I'm not sure I'm going to make a very good warrior, though. Too much." He looked at Blue, searching for the right word. "Gentleness?" "I don't think you have to fight with weapons to be a good warrior," Eska whispered. "You could fight with love and tears and inventions instead. That would probably be just as good." She thought of the way Balapan was fierce and tough and definitely wild, but there was a gentleness there too, even if it wasn't easy to spot at first. Eska stood up. "I think gentleness is a mighty word, because you have to be strong of heart to be kind." And Flint smiled then, because although Eska's voice didn't sound like much, she often found the words that mattered. The group hurried over the Devil's Dance floor, only too glad to leave the thunder ghosts behind. But as they stepped onto the snowy path through the mountains ahead, Flint cast a worried look at his sister. She was shivering badly and the light was fading fast. "We'll have to find a shelter and place to rest for the night. Blue needs dry clothes, a fire, and some warm food," Flint said. He scoured the banks of snow either side of him. "The grizzlies hibernate in the Never Cliffs, so if we find a bear cave, we can bed down there." "With bears?" Esker shifted. "Or will they have finished hibernating?" Flint rolled his eyes. "It'll just be us. Come on, before we lose the light completely." It took them an hour to find a bear cave in the end, and it was Esker who spotted the opening before a cluster of trees on the mountainside opened up. They helped Blue inside the rocky den, and while Pebble snuggled close to her, Flint lost no time in gathering kindling for a fire and branches for bedding. Esker prepared the remaining ptarmigan. Before long they had a fire flickering and the colour returned to Blue's cheeks, and even though the Ice Queen's anthem rolled out again that night, even louder than before, Esker's voice was ebbing away. Flint refused to be afraid, because their strange little tribe was still together, and they had a plan, and though the short night was coming in, he knew that Balapan would keep guard. They left the cave early the next day with the notes of the Ice Queen's anthem still ringing in their ears and journeyed on through the Never Cliffs under a sunless sky, hiking slopes so steep they bent into a crawl, traversing ridges so narrow they hardly dared breathe, and skiing through valleys so vast and white it was almost impossible to tell which was up and down against the clouds. Flint paused, panting before the summit of yet another mountain. "I can see how the Ice Queen never found the Feather Tribe." Esker and Blue pulled up beside him. "We'll find them," Esker said. Then she nodded to Balapan, wheeling above them. "Remember, the Ice Queen didn't have the wild on her side." Blue pointed to the snowy overhang a few steps further up the mountain. It was lined with enormous icicles that hung down in turquoise fangs. "Don't I like them? They horrid," Blue said, shrinking inside her furs. Flint looked at the row of ice daggers and shuddered. Something about them felt oddly sinister. "Let's keep going until we get over the top of this mountain, and then we'll strap on our skis, find a short, safe spot for food, and..." His words were cut short as one of the icicles dropped into the snow at his feet. It stuck in the snow like a lance. Flint shook himself. "Skis on now. Let's get some speed around the side of this mountain." Blue frowned. "You said top of hills for skis." Flint eyed the fringe of icicles. "Not anymore. Something doesn't feel quite right about this slope." Another shard of ice fell from the overhang, and from Flint's hood Pebble whimpered, and then more and more followed. The entire row of icicles was raining down like a flurry of spears. A barrier of crisscrossed ice lay before them, and up in the sky Balapan screeched. Flint's flesh crawled. This was a mountain bidden to obey the Ice Queen, and they were right in the midst of it. Yanking Blue's boots into their bindings, Flint tried to ignore the strange clicking, clattering sound coming from below the overhang. But when Esker looked up and gasped, he couldn't ignore it any more, and he watched pulse thrashing as the shards of ice gathered themselves up into a figure the size of a very tall tree. Its body glittered, its fingers were long, sharp slices of ice, and all around its gaunt head barbs of frosted hair jutted. But it was the mouth that made Flint tremble, a dark cave strung with glinting icicles. The figure blew out a deep, heaving breath, as if waking from a long slumber, and his ice teeth rattled. He's real," stammered Flint. Esker recoiled. "Who is?" Flint tightened his hood round Pebble, grabbed Blue's hands, and pushed with his poles. "Needle Spin!" he yelled. "The ghoul that haunts Nevercliffs." Chapter 21. Esker. Jamming her poles into the snow, Esker led the way round the side of the mountain. "Ski! Fast!" she cried. Down they went, undoing hours of hard climbing, but that didn't matter now because Needlespin was scuttling closer, wielding a silver-spiked ball and chain, and though Balapan dived at him again and again, he barged her out of the way and stormed on. "This it is!" he cackled, "running away so soon!" His voice was full of spiked edges, and at the end of every sentence the words snapped off like broken ice. "Keep going," she shouted, "keep going." But Needlespin was gaining on them, closing the children in between two mountains. Esker scanned the slopes for a crossing point until her eyes rested on a fallen boulder covered in snow that was wedged between the mountains. She took in the vast drop below it, several hundred metres at least, then she found herself pointing towards the boulder with a ski pole. It was the only way. Across there, she bellowed, nipping from the mountainside onto the boulder. Blue followed with Flint close behind. You think I won't leave my mountain? Needlespin screeched, and he leapt over the gap between the slopes as if he was jumping over a puddle. He landed in a crouch and his icicled limbs creaked. Then he looked up, his teeth jangling. Not when I've been given my orders by the Ice Queen to hold you here. Eska's mind whirled as they skied on down the next mountain. She thought about the inventions stashed inside Flint's rucksack and the quiver on her own back. But there was no time to reach for anything like that because Needlespin was now swinging the ball and chain above his head. Ice! He shrieked. Ice! He shrieked, thumping the spike ball down into the snow. More ice! And Blue, Flint and Eska screamed because beneath their skis they felt the mountain harden into a slope of bruised ice. Their skis lost grip, their poles clattered against the surface, and like the 3 runaway marbles, they shot down the mountain. Balapan plummeted too, but she was thinking faster, seeing faster, bending the wind to suit her own purpose, and missing the treetops and jutting overhangs by the slightest turn of her feathers. The eagle called out above a lip of ice. Eska summoned up her voice until it was as loud as she could make it. Point your skis towards Balapan. That's a jump, Flint screamed. We'll soar for miles. Blue won't manage the landing. But Eska was tilting her skis towards the eagle now, towards the mound of glittering ice scooping up to the next mountain. And with no better ideas, Flint snatched Blue's hand and steered her little sister after Eska. Pebble's eyes grew large as they neared the lip. And close on their heels, Needlespin sniggered, You can't outrun me, children. Wherever you go, I'll find you. His words echoed through the Nevercliffs, but Eska, Flint and Blue careered on, and then 1, 2, 3, they were soaring off the ice lip, climbing the height of the mountain opposite in the air. They landed with a poof in powder snow, a tangle of skis, poles and limbs, before a cluster of trees dripping with icicles. Flint twisted round to face Blue. Are you okay? Blue's bottom lip was wobbling. I'm scared, Flint, scared. Eska glanced round. I think we've lost Needlespin. Maybe you could only cross those few first mountains. Pebbles scrambled out of Flint's coat and peered close to the tree behind them. He took a few steps forward and then silence throbbed. Then, as Balapan veered towards them, Eska spotted movement within the trees. A silver blue eye flicked open between the branches, an icicled claw curled round her trunk, and then, as Pebble clattered backwards, Flint Needlespin burst out from behind a tree. He missed me! The monster spat. He lumbered towards them, and the group scrambled to their feet and launched their skis down the mountain. But they could hear Needlespin's ball and chain whirring in circles as it spun around them in a torrent of icicles shot out from the silver spikes, narrowly missing the children's furs. Ice spears! Blue cried. Flint clutched her hand for a moment. Keep going, just keep going. But Eska had learned to listen when the panic crowded in, to eagles, to the wild, and to remember to the quiet beat of her heart. Whitefur, it was saying. Remember what Whitefur said to you back in the giant's beard. And as she darted between trees and swerved around humps and dips in the snow, she thought of the hideaway behind the waterfall and how the man who might or might not have been an Erkenbear had filled it with diamond dust. She whispered, Whitefur. Flint shot her a glance as he stooped beneath a tree. What? Whitefur, Eska said again as one of Needlespin's icicles whizzed past her ear. At the time when you need help most, say my name. That's what Whitefur said. And as Needlespin roared behind them, his teeth jangling like hollow bones, Flint and Eska shouted Whitefur's name. Again and again they bellowed it. And at first, Needlespin simply laughed and hurled out another batch of icicles. Then a curious thing happened. Tiny flecks of shimmering silver puffed out into the air around Flint and Eska, and no matter how many times Needlespin pitched his weapons, he couldn't hit the boy or the girl. The icicles simply bounced off the shell of sparkling snow and clattered to the ground. Whitefur's diamond dust. It's protecting us. Then she watched, aghast, as Needlespin charged down the mountain behind them and tossed a spear at Blue. It struck her on the elbow and she cried out in pain. Flint swerved towards her, taking a little of her weight. Say Whitefur's name, it will help you. Blue leant into her brother's side as they skied. Don't understand, Flint, don't understand. Yes, you do, Blue, you do, trust me. Say Whitefur's name. White, white, white fur, she stammered. Yes, Blue, again, louder this time. Blue flung the Erkenbear's name out into the Nevercliffs as Needlespin's spear reared towards her. White fur, white fur, white fur. The icicle crashed to the ground, and all around her the diamond dust danced. Blue, Flint, and Esker flew on down the mountain, shooting off bumps and veering round trees. Now what? Flint shouted to Esker. Follow Balapan. And though Needlespin scuttled over the snow towards them, flinging his ball and chain against the trees, they followed the eagle until it circled a cliff edge with a terrifying drop beneath. Flint turned to Esker as they raced towards it. No, no, he breathed. Balapan plummeted down and then tucked her wings in just before she hit the snow. She soared up into the sky again, and with one eye on the snow and one eye on her eagle, Esker tried to understand what Balapan was saying. Pull up at the last minute, she panted, tucking into a ball to quicken her pace, and grab whatever you can to stop yourself from falling. Trust me. Behind them, Needlespin's voice hacked through the air. Over you go, Splinter Splat! You'll be easier to guard with broken bones! Esker, Flint, and Blue were level now, and as they sailed towards the cliff edge with Needlespin just meters behind, they yanked their weight sideways, slipped off the edge, and then clung to the tops of the trees immediately beneath. Needlespin charged over the lip, his arms wide, ready to crush the children in his ice grasp, but they were nowhere to be seen. And as the monster leapt into the air, he realized his stride had been too big, too greedy, because he'd overshot his prey. And the trees they clung to, and far, far below, snaking through the cliffs, was the one thing that could break him. Guys. The frozen river loomed like a shadow, and Needlespin picked up more and more speed as he hurtled towards it, limbs flailing. Then there was an almighty crash as he hit the ice, and Esker, Flint, and Blue, clutching at the branches of the trees beneath the ledge, watched the broken pieces of Needlespin's body rattle across the river. That's the end of that chapter. We're going to leave it there, and we'll see you tomorrow, ready for chapter 22. Bye-bye.